beginning of our opening, Anthony Joseph Digmann. Who is he? He's an author, he's a speaker, he's an educator, he's a cinematographer, and he's also an author of a book that he's written called Sign of Contradiction. So, and you can get that book at Religious Catalog. So you just go to Religious Catalog, EWTNRC.com. It's a great cover. Sign of Contradiction has a picture of the birth control pill, and then on the bottom of the cover is a beautiful family. There is a contradiction. What is best for us? What does God say? What does the church teach? Have we missed it, or are we spot on? So we're going to talk about some of those things, but Anthony, we want to welcome you to At Home with Jim and Joy.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, you're a father of two.
Yes.
You are in Dyersville, Iowa, where they're having really bad weather right now. So we're really glad you're here.
Me too.
And you're a teacher, which puts you every single day in the classroom with students where you really get to tell the truth and defend the culture of life against this culture of death.
You're with high school students.
High school students, yes.
What's the name of the school?
Beckman Catholic High School in Dyersville, Iowa. Dyersville's well known for a couple special things other than Beckman Catholic High School. They are the home of the St. Francis Xavier Basilica, which is really rare. It's an anomaly being in a very rural area. The town is about 4,500 to 5,000 people, and it's just a beautiful basilica. Dyersville is also the home to the Field of Dreams, so for any baseball fans, they could sure come up and enjoy the basilica as well as the Field of Dreams. But I teach seniors and sophomores currently at Beckman Catholic, and it's just a privilege to teach them. The area is a very Catholic area. The ancestry of the Catholic faith there is strong, which is why they could build the basilica, as well as so many other beautiful churches that are in the area. Just some wonderful families and wonderful students that I have the pleasure of teaching every day and allowing them to share so much of their lives with me and teach me as well.
Well, share with us your own kind of journey in this area. You have a very strong focus on marriage, sexuality, natural family planning versus contraception. What was your own personal journey in this area?
Sure. I think I was about 18 years old or so when I started to question a lot of things. I was raised a cradle Catholic, and I went to Mass every Sunday and such, and had a faith life and a prayer life, but I wouldn't say that it had a lot of heart to it. It didn't have a lot of depth to it. And when I was 18, I really started to doubt a lot of things, really 16, 17, 18 or so, but it really culminated in when I was 18 years old as a senior. I went on a retreat, had a bit of a spiritual experience that touched my heart, and I started to open up to this religion thing, and you know, God, if you're really there, you know, can you answer this prayer, and what does it all mean? And I'm really committed to the truth, so if I was going to be a part of something, I needed to believe that it was really true. And the way that I processed that kind of thing is I needed evidence, I needed information. So I started to delve into the world's religions. I started to look, once I got into Christianity and was convinced of the person of Jesus Christ, that he was who he says he is, looking at different denominations and trying to discern where the truth really is. Eventually, thankfully, I find my way back into Catholicism. Throughout that process, though, I would wrestle with some things that were difficult for me. The Eucharist was a very difficult thing for me to go from believing that what appears to be just bread and wine is actually Jesus' body, blood, soul, and divinity. That was very hard for me. Things come easier to my head, and they just don't go to my heart quite as easily. So that one took some time. Why go to confession to a priest? I had Protestant friends who would ask such great questions, and it was wonderful for me to work through the answers of those and share those with my friends, as well as for myself to process those. The issue of marital sexuality and contraception and family planning, that was one of my tough subjects. I was not convinced of the church's teaching. I attended a Catholic elementary school, but then went to a public junior high and high school. And in 7th grade, we had the human sexuality or sex education courses, and they were, I would not have sent my child through that had I known exactly what was going to be going on.
Were they abstinence-based, or was it another source that came in?
They gave us a overview of just about anything you would want to know about contraceptives and how they work, which I think was beneficial from an objective point of view. I don't think I needed that information as a 13-year-old. I think it would have been more useful maybe 18 and above, perhaps. But God bless my teacher. He was excellent in that after he completed talking about all of the contraceptives that are out there, at least he told us, you know what, children, there is one method that is 100% effective at preventing the spread of diseases and unwanted pregnancy: abstinence. So at least, and I recognize that. There was something in my heart when he said that, even at 13 and not super active in the faith, that just, it felt the truth. And I was like, yes, that's true.
Yeah. So you're going down this road, you're looking at different options. What was it, who was it that led you into this realm of, hey, contraception is not good versus natural family planning? Tell us more about the journey, how you landed on natural family planning.
My parents got a divorce when I was in elementary school, and my father dated a little bit afterward. My mother has since remarried, and she's living in Illinois now. I have a great father, stepdad as well. And my dad, he got into Catholic apologetics, and he got into answering questions, and he dated some ladies who weren't Catholic. And he got some really great materials. So I was exposed when I was 18 to Scott Hahn and Steve Ray and Tim Staples and a lot of those guys that helped me see the truth in Catholicism. But it was Dr. Janet Smith's talk on contraception, why not? When I first heard that, I had a lot of doubts going into it, but when I first heard that talk, that was the first presentation that I had experienced that made it logical. It made sense. There was more depth that I could uncover there, and I started to get this inkling that, you know what? Catholicism really may have the truth here, and it's a challenging truth, but truth nonetheless. It gives life when you encounter that truth. So that was really my first step into these truths about contraception and family planning.
Can you summarize for us the teaching of the church?
Sure.
On natural family planning versus contraception and why?
Sure. As the church takes a look at our human sexuality, it sees in it God's plan. It sees in it that marital sexuality and the marriage as a whole should resemble God and God's love. So it should be, as some theology of the body commentators have summarized it, free, total, faithful, and fruitful, that there's a language of the body involved there, and that the couple's love should image God's love for us. You know, it should be eternal, it should be fruitful, it should be all of us that's put into this love. So when the church looks at our sexuality and discerns God's plan for us, looking from Scripture and tradition, there's two primary parts to it. Human sexuality is to be unitive, and it is to be procreative.
Can I just have you pause there for a minute?
Sure.
Because the first thing that you've hit on was what did it for me, because I didn't always follow this way. That you said that our sexuality is to model, to some degree, the love of God and to model our God. When I got that versus just simply this is the right way, this is the wrong way, which is important to know. And for many Protestants, I spent a lot of time in a different tradition, and I just didn't get why not contraception. It just seemed like, well, we can participate in having children or not having children, this would be a legitimate way. But when it got to what you just said, and especially for evangelicals or Pentecostals or Christian people, when I understood that and when I've shared with others, even in my own family, you know, why not contraception? Because like you were saying, we need to give ourselves in totality, comprehensively in this marital bond and relationship, because it reflects somehow, some way, Christ's love for the church. It reflects somehow, some way, the love within the Holy Trinity. Because there are a number of people who are committed Christian people who don't see anything wrong with contraception, but when they hear what you just said, and I know there's so much more, but I just wanted to underline it for me, because this is what did it for me. I was hearing all the other things, and I was a Christian. But when I heard you're not modeling the love for Christ rightly in a marital relationship unless you're giving yourself in this way, that you're renewing the covenant as Christ loves the bride. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
It's so powerful, and I think that some people really connect with that.
Yes, indeed, yeah. And God's calling for us, He knows what's best for our hearts. He built us, He made us in His image and likeness, and we must, of course, imitate that image and likeness. The more that we reflect that, the happier that we will be, the more free we will be, and the more joyful we will be.
And there's so many people who want to please Jesus. They want to please God. And I'm learning as I go along in life, there's a lot fewer people in outright rebellion. I thought there were more. But it's really, they don't get it. They don't understand it. And if they would be getting what you're saying, they really want to please Jesus. Do you mean I wouldn't be pleasing to the Lord if I'm not giving myself this way to my mate? And it's critical.
But it's all about really a conversion of the heart, because you have, and it is love that causes us to obey. And if we say we love the Lord with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, but we're being disobedient in one area, you know, then it really is a matter of the conversion of the heart, which is say, Lord, I want to be all in. And so if there's anything where I'm not all in, lift the scales from my eyes, unplug my ears that are deaf, and my heart, because it's all about control, right? I mean, it's all about control. Like, I have a boy or a girl, I'm done, thank you, God, very much. You
Yes.
know? And I mean, we had a couple the other day. They were married. They had one child. They were pregnant with the second child, and they chose to abort the second child because they don't want any more children. And they were on birth control, and they were being responsible, but the birth control failed because it has such a great failure rate. And they came in thinking we were an abortion clinic to abort the baby.
So what are the, before we interrupted you,
Ah,
and got into it, so did it for us, but you were saying that there's some principles or key components to
Yes.
proper sexuality or the relationship in marriage.
Yeah, as the church looks at our human sexuality, sex is for the unitive purpose and the procreative purpose. So unitive, you might say babies, and procreative, babies and bonding. I'm sorry, I got those
Right.
reversed, right?
Right.
So it's for babies and bonding, unitive and procreative. So God wants the couple to bond. God put the pleasure of the sexual act there so that the couple would be drawn to one another and of course, procreate and that kind of stuff. There seems to be a misconception sometimes among Catholics that they think that the Catholic Church believes that sex is for procreation and procreation only. And that's simply not true. God wills both of those. One of the key components here with the unitive and procreative, or the babies and the bonding, is that they cannot be separated. They must be together in the sexual action. You cannot engage in a sexual action and desiring it, for example, to be procreative, but I don't want to bond with my spouse in this action. That's not what sex is built for. That doesn't image God's love for us. Similarly, with contraceptives, people want to engage in the action, engage in the bonding, perhaps the pleasure and the bonding involved, but don't want the procreative element to come with it. But the procreative element is an integral part of what you're doing in the sexual action. It's like eating. An integral part is receiving the nutrients. To eat and to reject the nutrients is something opposed to the nature of what we're doing.
So the procreative possibility has to be there.
Right. The church uses the words open to life. Some people would think that, well, you know, we could use a contraceptive, but if we got pregnant, we wouldn't have an abortion, perhaps, and they consider that open to life. That's not what the church means when it talks about being open to life. The church means in an objective sense, which means that the very action that you engage in, there's nothing that you do that intentionally thwarts and stops your fertility from working. So your fertility always needs to have the ability to work and be fruitful. You can't stand in the way of that. Now, as far as natural family planning works, there's a distinction. The couple who uses natural family planning, they learn their fertile cycles, they learn about the woman's body, and it's so life-giving and it's so helpful. Knowledge is power, and for women it's just an absolutely beautiful thing to understand their bodies and their fertility and how it works. And they are able to understand when they're fertile and when they're not fertile. So if now is not a good time to have another child, they could refrain from intercourse. Now, there's a difference between that and contraceptives, because they are choosing not to engage in an action that is of its essence, it brings babies, it's a fertile action. Whereas the contracepting couple is shutting down their fertility, they're blocking that fertility. So there's a big difference between the two, even though some people might say, well, a contracepting couple and a natural family planning couple have the same goal.
Right.
But they arrive at that in two different ways.
Well, and it's so important, especially in the church, to get this teaching out, because when you say to people, the abortion and contraception are the fruit of the same tree, they'll, no, it's not. But yes, it is, because to be against life is to be against God. And that it's like, well, but I don't we don't need any more children, or they'll make the list this long. And it's the same list that I hear when a client wants to abort somebody, as the same list and the excuses that people use when they choose to use other methods of contraception.
Sure. And the church in its wisdom and truth understands that. So this is one of the beauties of natural family planning, is when we reach, for example, this era of the 1900s, 20th century, and we have such good medicine and people are living longer and we're able to have many, many, many children, people who discern that now might not be a good time for more or any more, they have natural family planning. The science has also developed that we understand the woman's body well enough to harness that knowledge, and God has given us that gift to utilize natural family planning and not engage in intercourse when we're fertile, if that be the case, and to use that knowledge the way God would intend it.
Because, you know, we deal with it on a daily basis with clients that have used birth control and it fails. And, you know, it really, and the language out on the street and the culture of death now is, it's from guy to girl, what's your body count? What's your body count? It's like, how many people have you had sex with? You know, and you think, the opposite of love is in hate. The opposite of love is usury. And how men are using women, and women are letting themselves be used. It's not like we're the victims. It's true in this relationship, but you just see the total wreckage of that for everybody, for male and female. And I wish that I could say it's not in the church. It is in the church. So your book, The Sign of Contradiction, is so important because we have to educate and then we have to empower with knowledge. So how is it being received?
You know, this issue within the church is a very difficult one. You mentioned the culture of death, and that's certainly true, not only outside of the church, but also within the church. There's certainly this culture of death mentality, this contraceptive mentality that I want to engage in intercourse, but not have babies come forth from it. Surveys indicate that Catholics are at about 80% rejecting the church's teaching, which is one of the things that really got my antenna up in terms of this subject, and one of the reasons why I wanted to get into it in the first place is so few Catholics understand this teaching. A wide majority of them reject it, according to surveys. So it was something that I wanted to explore some more. Why, especially as an 18-year-old when I got started, why is this such a struggle for Catholics? And as I got into learning more about it, I found that there's so much ignorance. And I don't mean ignorance in a degrading or bad way. I just mean in the natural sense of ignorance. And certainly I was, until I had my father and others share some information with me, and my eyes and heart were opened to the truth. So there's so many people who this would be such a beautiful teaching for them to uncover, such a jewel, such a treasure, such a beauty.
Let's pause right there.
And we do want you to know that viewer discretion is advised. We're having a really sensitive subject, but a needed subject.
It's a beautiful subject.
It's a beautiful, yeah, right. And it's so beautiful. We all need to hear it again and again, because we all need to be converted to the truth more and more and more.
Well, Anthony, Joseph, I wanted to kind of go back and underline again this whole idea of there are times where a couple, married couple, is saying this may not be the best time for us to have another life, a child. So you want to postpone for a time, perhaps indefinitely. And so there's contraception. I mean, if that's the goal, why not contraception? Why the natural family planning? Because like you were saying, the goal is kind of the same. Well, maybe the goal isn't the same, because the goal is for, tell me if I'm right about this, kind of thinking it through. The goal for couples using NFP is, when is the best time for me to have a child? And contraception really revolves around very much, it's against having children. Like, I think one's more positive than the other. But there's this postponement that's there. Why is the natural family planning way, or the church's teaching on sexuality and intercourse for a married couple, and postponing in the way of using the natural cycle of that woman and using those times? Why is that legitimate? Or isn't that just like contraception? What is the church's thinking about that? Using those times where you can't be fertile, how are they different?
Sure. Natural family planning respects a woman's fertility. straight up, and it respects the woman. There's a big difference if you want to take a look at this from respect for women and the degrading of women that has occurred within our culture in the last few decades. Natural family planning looks at a woman's body and it sees her fertility as it is, and it works with that fertility. It doesn't break down the fertility, it doesn't stop it, it doesn't see the fertility as an enemy or something to be avoided. The fertility is something that is beautiful, and natural family planning works with a woman's fertility. When I learned natural family planning with my wife, we learned two versions of natural family planning, and God bless her, my wife Stephanie, we've been married a little over 10 years now, and I wouldn't have been able to research this book without all of the help that she gave me to free me up to be able to do that. But when we were learning natural family planning before we were engaged, I knew about natural family planning. I just didn't know the details, and I was convinced of it, you know, for us to learn it. But coming out of being trained in natural family planning, my appreciation for her as a woman, and women in general, just went through the roof. To understand how me as a guy, my hormones are pretty steady. So day in and day out, I'm feeling pretty consistent. Yeah. And whereas any lady, her hormones are fluctuating throughout the month naturally. So as our trainers put it, women, when you don't feel the same from day to day, this is why. And I looked at that and said, yeah, I see that. Just all the parts and the details that they went into it just helped me appreciate not only my wife, but women in general more. There's a huge mentality difference between contraception. Contraception is easy, okay? It is, I'm going to take control. I'm going to have an authority over this part of my body and then over my fertility. And natural family planning is also very effective. It's not just throwing it into the wind, but it is respecting our sexuality and our fertility and using it with God's plan in that way, respecting the woman's body.
That nails it. That's really good. I mean, that's a world of difference to say the natural order of a woman, her own person, her integration, her fertility is respected, seen as beautiful, and affirmed in what we're doing. And definitely there's various forms of contraception, but if we're thinking about the pill, I mean, it's in direct contradiction against that. It's really attacking that. It's against that. And that's a huge difference.
Well, and then the beauty is that so many women don't even understand their cycle and the beauty of how God made them. But they'll go on birth control, and then they'll put these toxins inside their bodies and never knowing their whole natural process. And we educate our clients in saying, you can't get pregnant every day of the month. And like, I can't. It's like, no, it's 72 to 100 hours, and you get to explain the whole beauty of it with them. But so many people are ignorant, but yet they'll take chemicals, they'll do a depot shot, they'll do an IUD, they'll do all these other crazy things and not even know the beauty of their own body.
So let's take a phone call from Cassandra. Cassandra is here with us via the phone. Welcome to At Home with Jim and Joy. Your question or your comment for Anthony Joseph Digmann. Cassandra, go right ahead.
Hi, Mr. Digmann. This is Cassandra from your class of 2012 at Beckman.
Hi, Cassie.
Hi. I just wanted to ask how you share this controversial topic with women, because for me, I'm a Creighton model practitioner, so I teach a method of NFP, and it's easy to explain what I do. When people ask what I do, I explain how the system works and everything. But then my clients ask me, how do I share this with other people and bring them to see the light? And I don't know how to explain to them how to bring it up in conversation when it's such a controversial topic.
Thanks for calling in, Cassandra.
Yeah, so my largest experience sharing this information is with my high school students, with the seniors in moral theology class. And Cassandra would have had this direct experience, though, some time ago, so I would like to think that it's improved over the last few years. But I found that being open, being honest, one of the most effective things I do with my students is bringing my energy and enthusiasm for this topic to bear, but also not only living it out so that they can see it in my own life and that this is true and this is beneficial to me. Why would I choose to do something consciously that is going to be so degrading to me or something like that? It's life-giving, in fact. So I try to be very open, very honest, allow open questions and that kind of thing. But to speak to Cassandra's question more specifically, for women, I think that this is empowering information, and this is a beautiful thing. I think for women, if they find a man who respects their body and the dignity of their body and how their body works. That's part of respecting her and her femininity in its entirety. On the contrary, unfortunately, if there's a man who expects her to put all kinds of pharmaceutical drugs into her body or even use a barrier method so that he can have intercourse based on his schedule, that's I don't want to use the word dominated, but that's the one coming to mind.
And it's usury.
Indeed, indeed, yes. Whereas the natural family planning husband, you might say, respects his body and cherishes it so intimately that he's willing to allow his sexuality and their sexual activity to be dictated, you might say, by her fertility cycles and not by his. And that's something beautiful and charitable and giving.
Yeah. And it's beautiful, it's charitable, and it's difficult because of discipline. It's a good discipline. You have to discipline yourself. The wife has to discipline herself because the peak of her fertility oftentimes is the time she's most desirous, right?
Of course. Women comment about this on a regular basis, that especially ones who might be learning it initially or thinking about getting into it, they might read, yeah, women naturally, God is giving them this desire right when they are fertile. So for the couple using natural family planning, if they are foregoing having another child right now, that's definitely a more intense time. But the methods of natural family planning teach that you don't cease to love one another.
Right.
Even during these times of heightened desire during the fertile time, you continue to love through your physical touch, through your conversation. So natural family planning couples over and over again in surveys indicate that their marriage is enriched, that their respect for one another grows, their communication grows, and that in turn leads to heightened levels of sexual satisfaction.
Yeah.
You don't believe this.
Right.
And
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
No, it's true. And then there's also a lower divorce rate amongst couples who are practicing natural family planning. Now, so you're teaching it in moral theology to seniors. How are they receiving it? What is their response to you? Are they following like Cassandra after she left high school? Now she's a presenter in the Creighton method. What is happening?
From what I see from students younger, they know a little bit. You know, some of them have more experience than others. A lot of them don't have a lot of knowledge of what natural family planning even is, or even what a lot of contraceptives are, at least in the parochial school in which I teach, where you wouldn't get that, 7th grade sex ed class at the public school like I had. So they're more open than what I would run into in 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds and, even older who had experience of humanae vitae in the 60s and the 70s and that kind of thing. So these younger generations are open to learning more. They're interested in learning more. They don't have so much of the stigma attached to it that some other generations would, even confusing it with what the previous methods were, like the calendar rhythm method and that kind of thing. They don't even know about that, so you don't have to worry about explaining the differences between the two and that kind of thing. So the younger generation is open. They're interested. They seem willing to learn, and I would educate children on this, within their teens, because that's a great opportunity to get this information out. Once they get into their 20s and they've started using a contraceptive or something like that, it makes it tougher to turn back, I think.
And in your diocese, are you explaining to engaged encounter when couples come in and they want to do marriage encounter and or even are they learning engaged encounter or for their marriage prep? Or because you do hear a lot of people who are in marriage prep, everybody's living together.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So how is that being presented to them?
Well, it's definitely part of the system. Keeping faithful to the church's teaching is definitely involved in that. It's been 10 years since my wife and I did the engaged encounter, and there was a video that was played and things like that. I think across the board, I've heard in my research and preparing for the book that there's some discontent, there's some disappointment with how much of this is being shared. It seems like there's not enough information, really, that more people need to know about this and be living it and then sharing the joys and the fruits of that. But there also seems to be a lot of fear out there. People are just hesitant. There's also a lot of people who want to do the Lord's will and they're willing to look into this and go deeper and then unpack the joys of it. But it's difficult, I think, because we need to be open to the people where they're at. We need to share the truth of the gospel. Certainly, none of us are perfect. I'm a sinner myself, of course, as we all are, and we all have our moments of ignorance, but we all also have opportunities where the truth hits us, and the truth is available to us. And what we do with our hearts and our minds, do we open to that truth and let the Lord in? It says a lot about our character and our relationship with the Lord.
Okay, well, we have another phone call. I believe this is Lewis on the phone. Lewis, welcome to At Home with Jim and Joy. Your question, your comment for Anthony.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for your ministry. My question is, as a Catholic couple married a number of years and having had children, how do you handle the situation where one spouse no longer wants to have children and the other spouse does? Or for that matter, intercourse. What advice or how do you suppose to handle that situation where they're opposing ideologies there?
Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Well, the church would say that, of course, couples have to discern this together, and that's part of the beauty of marriage. You know, it's difficult, and there's different desires in all areas. The
Right.
Finances is a big issue for couples in marriage, of course. One might be spendier, and the other might be more of a saver, and you know, there's always going to be these tensions. And the beauty in marital life, as you guys know, is trying to bring that together. And it's not always clean. It can be messy, and it can be a challenge. But you've got to have the heart of the Lord, and you've got to have the heart of being a giver and having a race to the bottom and serving the other. So in terms of all of these issues, should we have another child or not? The couple, of course, has to discern that together and ask what the Lord's will is.
Right.
You know, as far as intimacy, maybe frequency on intimacy, if I understood the caller correctly, the couple must, of course, discern this together. What is best for my spouse? Putting my spouse ahead of even my own desires and the Lord's desires ahead of all.
Yeah.
Well, and you know that, and you're not taught that. Just like nobody's taught how to die to themselves and live for the other. I mean, you learn that, but you're not taught that. And if you don't die well, you're not going to have a happy marriage or a happy life. And the beauty in marriage is really discerning what's God's plan for us. And you know, we all take for granted that if we come together and we're going to be intimate in this beautiful union, we are going to get pregnant. Well, that's not necessarily so. Or if you do get pregnant, sometimes it could be a spontaneous miscarriage within the pregnancy. But we all have this idea that we're all promised children, or, you know, and I'm going to have as many children as I want. And that's not true either. We've suffered in our family 8 miscarriages with our children and our grandchildren, and it breaks your heart. You know, so it really is discerning God's will and then trusting Him that He's going to give you what's best, right?
Anthony, tell us what people will find. Tell us your website, the address, and what they'll find when they go there. What resources are available for parents working with their kids, or what do you recommend? Where do we go?
Sure. My website is anthonydigmann.com. There I have my book is available. I also find that in this busy culture, a book, it takes quite a commitment to get through. So I gave a talk on this subject at the St. Francis Xavier Basilica. It's a beautiful church.
We watched that.
It's a beautiful church that it summarizes it really, that gives you the nuts and bolts of it, the highlights in maybe 50 minutes to an hour, and that's available on DVD, CD, and MP3 for download. I also have a number of free videos from my YouTube channel on my website, so you can get, if you want to know more about birth control pill being an abortifacient, or how this affects women, this whole topic, you can check out a 3 to 5 minute video on that free on my website. I also recommend One More Soul, the publisher of the book, One More Soul and I coming together. This was a wonderful marriage for this book because they have so many resources, just a wealth of resources. CDs, pamphlets, Janet Smith's talk, for example, came from them when I first encountered it. So it's wonderful to have it come full circle that that talk from One More Soul and Janet Smith could help me so much, and that I could give back through One More Soul. But they have so many resources available. It's just fantastic stuff to share.
Well, Anthony Joseph Digmann, thank you so much for this time and for beautifying the Church of our Lord Jesus Christ. God bless you and your great work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break.